It might look like when they wake up in the morning, they're able to experience the entire spectrum of the human condition, all the way from their bodily sensations. They're connected to their body. They know what they're feeling. They are grounded in where they are. They're not immediately, from the moment they wake up, jumping to the schedule of the day and planning out every hour and where I need to be and what I need to complete and do and submit. That's not a person who's heartful or living heartfully. Someone who's living heartfully is connected to their body, connected to their thoughts, aware of the nature of their thoughts, connected to the world around them. They notice the smells and they notice the different things to see. They notice the people around them. They notice the emotions that they have and the emotions that others have. And beyond that, expanding the spectrum here of experience, they're also aware of the fact that in this moment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees me and He's watching me. One of His names is Ar-Raqib, the watchful guardian who's watching over me. And He sees every step that I take and every thought that I have and every word that I utter, every breath that I exhale. He sees it all. And so now you start to really move through life in a very different way. You literally move different. Because you're not just going to get up and rush to the shower to get to work. You're not just asking yourself, what does my body need? You're not just asking yourself, what does my psyche need? It's not just what do the people around me need. It's also including what's my Lord demanding of me. It's a really different way of living. And it's a very holistic way of living. And for many of us, the spectrum of human experience has been like reduced. And for many of us, we live right here, up here. And what's interesting about mindfulness is mindfulness might try to connect you to your body a little bit, but if anything, it just promotes living more here, mindfully, with your mind. It might expand a little bit to what you feel, maybe, in the hopes of grounding you and feeling feel your back against the chair, feel your feet on the ground. It might do that. But it's definitely not focused on connecting you to others. And it's definitely not connected or focused on connecting you to God. And so when we speak of heartfulness, we're saying we're all experiencing life. But maybe some of us are only experiencing, from the 100% range, we're only experiencing 15 or 20%. And undoubtedly, that's going to have an impact on our well-being. We were not created to think life. We were created to live life. And there's a big difference. And so we spent some time talking about heartfulness and what is heartfulness. Now, we've spent the last few weeks prior to today talking about contemplation. We moved from heartfulness to contemplation as the bridge. Because what contemplation enables you to do is it opens you up, along with the other, inshallah, tools that we're going to speak about. But contemplation opens you up to greater realities and truths about existence. You start to see the world with far more significance than meets the eye. So for example, you don't just see someone. I see you, and we come in contact. And that could be looked at in a very mundane way. That it's a Monday night, I ran into this person, I talked to them, and okay, big deal. A heartful perspective would be, I ran into this person, which means Allah in His infinite wisdom and His perfect divine decree willed in eternity that today, in this moment, I should meet you. That this is not a coincidence. That you're not just here by accident. From our own human perspective, it feels like I made a decision, I talked to some friends, and I decided I'm coming tonight. As believers, we know All that occurs in existence happens by Allah's permission and His will, but also it was decreed. It's part of a divine plan. Al-Qadr wal-Qada. And imagine you live life like that. Then you wouldn't take any interaction for granted. It wouldn't be trivialized. It would hold cosmic and divine significance. It's like this was not just a random occurrence. This was Allah, creator of the heavens and the earth, decreed that today we should meet. And He's seeing how we meet and how we treat each other and how we talk to each other and whether or not we fulfilled our duties towards that person, and also did we adhere to the commands of God in this interaction. Then you don't go home at the end of the day treating your family how you feel like treating them, because it's like a blessing to come home and see your family. And God has willed that I should come home today. And when He stops willing that, I will not reach home. Instead, my funeral will go to the graveyard. That's the reality. It's not a pleasant thought, but it's reality. And so heartfulness is really attempting, when you contemplate and you reflect on existence, not merely as a horizontal experience, but as a vertical experience. Things have divine significance. Life then takes on profound meaning. Because I just gave the example of meeting someone, but you could start thinking, and some of us do this, we start thinking about what happens to us in life, the successes and the failures, and not thinking, why did it happen? But rather thinking, what's the lesson in it for me? Those are two very different questions that you can ask about the divine decree. What's the lesson here? What can I learn from this? What is my Lord teaching me through this? And it's a very different perspective. Life isn't just happening then. Life then becomes a series of lessons that shape you. And so life becomes very, I would say, wonderful. You're full of wonder. You contemplate, reflect. You're always thinking about, how did I spend my day? What were the conversations I had? When you start to plan the day, you don't just plan in terms of a schedule that relates to other people and your job and family, but also involves my Lord. And it also involves myself. The full spectrum. And so, kind of segueing from last week, I want to connect what we talked about, contemplating. We spoke a lot about contemplating over the universe, as Allah encourages us in the Quran, but we also spoke about reflecting and contemplating over our own conditions of who we are and how we are and how we're living our lives and the decisions that we make and the principles and beliefs and values that we live by, to go back and reflect. Might there be a better way to go and experience life and live life? To reevaluate. There's a challenge that comes with this, though. Before you can actually contemplate and reflect on yourself, there's a prerequisite, which is safety. Let's talk about that. See, I want you to imagine you're at home, you're sitting, you have your cup of coffee, it's early morning, everyone in your house is sleeping. And you're like, the dude on Monday night was talking about something related to like reflection and contemplation. Let me try this out. I want to reflect on my own life. So you sit down, and there's nobody there in the room with you. The lights are dim, and you close your eyes, and you start to think about yourself. And as you do that, inevitably you're going to come, to some degree, you're going to come face to face with yourself. You're going to have to face the things that you don't like about yourself, the things that you're not proud of. You're going to come face to face with certain aspects of your current identity that you are embarrassed by. You're going to come face to face with yourself. The challenge is, what happens when you are a stranger to yourself? And really, I think a lot of people today are strangers to themselves. What do I mean by that? You might say, like, if there's anybody I know, it's me. I may not know you, but at least I know myself. Well, let's pause. I want to read a quote to you. This is taken from Sheikh Mikael Smith's With the Heart in Mind. He says, by ignoring our emotions and our inner world, we slowly develop a lack of familiarity with ourselves. What does he mean by that? By ignoring our emotions and inner world. The idea of an inner world, this is like foreign to many of us. It's the idea that the human being has great depth. But if you never consider that depth, then you live externally. If we could describe it as you live externally. What does that mean? That means you're just constantly focused outward. If attention and focus and the orientation of your being was a light beam, it would constantly be directed outwards, never inwards. So a sign of this, for example, would be that you can never see your role in a problem. Children live very externally. Children live very externally. If you see children, when something happens, you say, why did you do that? They will never say, well, I felt this and I was thinking this. They'll say, he did this, so I did that. He said this, so I did that. They live very externally. All they see is the world around them impressing itself upon them. They don't have the ability to introspect and realize how I show up in the world also influence what comes back my way. How I show up in the world also will influence the behaviors that come back my way. And so we live very externally. For many of us, we're not trained. Our education system does not train us to develop inner awareness. We don't have classes on emotional intelligence and in the ability to introspect and skills of introspection. We don't have classes. Most people were never taught this. Their parents did not impress this upon them. They were just taught, get good grades, get a good job, and go get married. Not realizing that when you enter marriage, perhaps even before you face someone else, you come face to face with yourself. If you are willing to turn the focus inward. But we're in the habit of living externally, right? So like, what did that person say? What did they do? We live fast lives. It seems so inefficient to take out time and like, I wonder what I'm feeling. I wonder what's going on within. Why did I do that? It's like, I got things to do. I got to get stuff done. And you want me to sit down 10 minutes? Like, in that time, I could like get something done. That's how we think about life. We do life. We do it. We're just doing. We're human doings. There's no moment to pause and say, what's the state of my being? So we live very externally. As a result, we're not really familiar with what's going on inside. Imagine a house with like 10 rooms. We are checking 9 rooms every day, and this is one room we just never check. We open the door to 9 rooms every day, just checking. What's happening? The one room we just never check. That's our inner world. What's going on in there? No idea. We have no idea what's going on in there. So he says, by ignoring our emotions and inner world, we slowly develop a lack of familiarity with ourselves. And then this lack of familiarity with ourselves leads to avoiding inner reflection and contemplation. Because when you start trying to turn inwards, it's not pleasant. You come face to face with things you don't want to come face to face with. And he says, so we feel awkward when we're alone. Just as one feels awkward in the presence of a stranger. He says, we've effectively become strangers to ourselves. Classic example. I give it all the time. You enter an elevator. and there's only one other person in there. Oh, that's the most awkward elevator ride ever, right? Because like you just kind of face the front, like the door, and you just kind of pull out your phone and play with the calculator, right? Like, you're just like, okay, like what are you gonna do? It seems really weird, and both, it's crazy because both feel so uncomfortable. Should I say hi? What if they don't respond? That'll just make it even more awkward. So maybe just settle for this level of awkwardness. Because they're a stranger. You have no idea who they are. And so what happens when you want to contemplate and reflect and face yourself and start to be present with yourself, but it's hard to be present with a stranger. And so we can find it very uncomfortable to do this. That's why we often can't tolerate being alone with our own thoughts. Right? The idea that I'm just alone. It's not uncommon to hear people say what? When I'm alone, I have to like turn on a podcast or a video on YouTube or some Quran or something else. Like I have to have some noise. Just silence? I can't do it. Because imagine sitting with a total stranger. Right? Like it's just, what do you say? And it's not, you could still strike up a conversation with a total stranger. But here's the thing. What happens when you're a total stranger to yourself? But not only that, the stranger that you are is hypercritical of you. Hypercritical. Imagine, you sat with this person, every time you sit with this person, they remind you of your failures. Every time. When you're alone at night, you put your head on the pillow, close your eyes, you come face to face with that stranger, and the stranger says, do you remember? Why'd you do that? How stupid were you? And you're like, oh, okay, maybe I should put something on so I can just listen to it and fall asleep. Because just alone with my thoughts, I start shaming myself. I start criticizing myself. I start telling myself, why would you say that? That was such a dumb thing to say. You should have said this. And then we start having these conversations in our heads the way we wish the conversation went. Whenever we're alone and we try to face ourselves, what happens when that stranger within us is hypercritical? And if anyone is hypercritical of you, what do? You dislike them and you avoid them. You avoid them. And that's how we can feel towards ourselves. We avoid ourselves. And so how, when you want to reflect and contemplate, how can you sit with yourself when you feel so uncomfortable and unsafe? Because the very self that you want to face is so critical of you. You have to feel safe. And that's where, when a person has deep shame, struggling with low self-esteem, they have a strong inner critic, a voice within them that just criticizes. And I'll give you an example. Because you might say, well, I don't think I have that. It sounds like someone's, schizophrenic. Like, what, you got this voice in your head? No. I mean, let's say you mess something up, right? So, family gathering, and you try to do something in front of everybody, and like you mess it up, and then everyone's like looking at you kind of weird, and your dad is kind of like embarrassed, or your mom's so embarrassed, like, I told you that's not how you're supposed to do it, and you're like, oh. And when you turn around and you're walking away and you're mumbling to yourself, that's the inner critic right there. You're so stupid. Why'd you do that? Oh, all right. Oh, come on, what's wrong with you? And you talk to yourself. And I've seen people do this. I have seen students I remember this once in a university class. The student put up their hand. It's like a class of like 500 people. The huge ones, 101s, 500 people. Student put up their hand, answered a question, got it wrong. They're sitting and they just kind of you just kind of slowly like just sink into the seat. So your head almost falls below the seat level. And I just could see from the angle, they're like, it's like berating themselves. Berating themselves. There's a reason why we do that, right? Likely we were brought up being berated. our behavior was controlled through hypercriticism. We took on that voice in our heads, and it's a very powerful thing for men. It's a very powerful thing for men. The way that we are harder sometimes on ourselves than anyone, and we never talk about it. And so we just really, not to say that women do not experience it, but I think men have a much harder time talking about this, right? Because it's just like, I don't need anyone's help. I just need to fix myself. If I'm just harder on myself, I'll be better. The idea of self-compassion is not a thing for many. And so when we don't feel safe with ourselves and being able to face ourselves, we won't be present with ourselves. You cannot be present. It's too painful to be present. So then where are you going to be? You're going to be absent. The word absent comes from the Latin roots, which means to be away from something. And one way to think about it is also not just to be away from, but for someone to be away from being itself. So then what do we do when we're deeply uncomfortable with ourselves? What do? We occupy ourselves in doing, in thinking, in living externally. And it's all a distraction. It's all a distraction from having to face ourselves, to be present with ourselves, because we don't feel safe. And so we can be physically present somewhere. Our body's there. But absence through our minds. We're gone somewhere else. We're away from ourselves, like in prayer, like in salah. Allahu Akbar, you're standing there. Mentally you check out. And your body goes through the motions. But you're not there. You're absent. You're not present. And you're not doing it because you're a terrible Muslim. That's not the only reason why people do that. People will do that because it's too uncomfortable to be right there where they are. And imagine someone who physically is somewhere, but every other part of their psyche and their whole experience is elsewhere. They're thinking about something else. They're living just externally. They're talking about you and them, anyone else, and talking about ideas. But if anyone asks them a question about them, it's like, ugh, I need to get this spotlight off of me and get back onto you. Don't ask me how I'm doing. Let's talk about how you're doing, because it's way too uncomfortable trying to put the spotlight here. This is the total antithesis and the opposite of heartfulness. Total opposite. And you can start to see why safety is so important. That you feel that you're not a stranger to yourself. One person said, the only person that you'll be with your entire life is you, so make sure you're in good company. At nighttime, you say bye to your friend and they go to their home and you go to your home. Your sibling goes to their bedroom, you go to your bedroom. Your partner, your spouse, sleeps in their world and you sleep in your world. The only one that's with you all the time is you. So make sure you're in good company. And so, how then do we develop that safety? So that we can even begin to contemplate and reflect and be present and live heartfully. How do we even start that? Well, we have to ask, what happened? I'm going to say something that's going to be challenging. And I hope you can anchor yourself enough to listen to what I'm about to say. For someone who has not spent much time trying to understand and heal themselves. And when I say healing, I don't mean some mystical / cliche idea of sitting in a therapy chair and just, yapping away. That's not what I mean. When I say healing, I mean you reintegrate. You become whole again. You reintegrate. You face those painful parts of you and you acknowledge how they're affecting you in your life. And you work to reduce the harmful effects that they're having on your life, day to day, moment to moment. So you catch yourself when you're about to lash out. You fight yourself and you control it. Right? You learn to not just act from a place of pain. And it's such a profound thing when someone is able to actually face their pain, not just operate from pain, but face it. I remember talking to somebody. They were really hurt by one of their family members. And the whole conversation for about 25 minutes was simply, how could they do that? This was a question to me. How could they do that? Don't they see how much pain I'm in? Why are they not coming to apologize? And they were just in so much pain about how they were treated. And when I suggested, well, it seems you're really hurt by them. No, no. Them? No, they can't hurt me. I'm just really upset. Now, it might just seem like a semantic difference, like a play on words. Yeah, I'm just upset. It's the refusal to accept that you're vulnerable to being hurt. And so you're actually in pain. No, I'm angry. Below anger, there's sadness, there's pain. There's something on. They came face to face with, yes, this person hurt me. And it really does. It doesn't make me weak. Why do people refuse to accept that they've been hurt? Because for them it means I'm weak. And they said, no, I'm not weak. I'm actually very courageous for putting myself in a position where I could be hurt. Because that takes courage. So I had a conversation with them weeks later. And I said, how are things with that relative? And they said, subhanAllah, they said, I'm really thinking of reaching out to them. I said, subhanAllah. Previously, they said, maybe that person, and they started making excuses for the person. Maybe that person meant this or felt this. I said, wow. Last conversation, you for a moment could not consider the other person's perspective. You were blinded by your pain and your anger because you didn't want to accept your pain. So you were masking it with anger. And I said, finally, when you face that, no, I'm just hurt. I'm in pain. And you kind of allowed, for that acknowledgement. Then the pain that was within you received the attention and the honor that it deserved. It felt like, okay, you finally acknowledged me. When you did that, this gave you the ability to, it no longer was yelling and shouting to be acknowledged. And now you could see the other person because you're not blinded by it anymore. And so when you can see the other person, you can start to try to reconnect. That's healing. That's healing right there. Is that difference that where they get to a point where they're not saying it's okay what they did. That's not healing necessarily. It's not dismissing what happened. It's saying, but I'm not going to let it control my behavior. So what am I want to come back to my point. For someone who hasn't spent time trying to understand and heal themselves, if you're trying to figure out the state of your nervous system, likely you can get a good idea of it by examining the nervous systems of your parents. Why? It's because parents serve as the foundation for your nervous system development. And unless you've made an effort to really transform and heal that nervous system, you probably have a very similar nervous system. Why? We know we have the saying, hurt people hurt people. Dysregulated nervous systems dysregulate other nervous systems. 100%. Yeah. Oh, what's the question? I'm kind of lost. Does anyone recall? I'll go back 2 points and then let me see if I can follow it. For someone who hasn't spent much time trying to understand and heal themselves, they can likely get a decent idea of the state of their own nervous system by looking at the nervous system of their parents. And why? Because parents serve as the foundation for nervous system development in their children. And I said, I quoted the statement, hurt people hurt people. The equivalent of that in our discussion here today is dysregulated nervous systems will dysregulate other people's nervous systems. And so if you haven't actively made an effort to address this, you're probably still dealing with a nervous system that was shaped by your parents. And if they are dysregulated, you're likely dysregulated. which will explain a little bit about why, as you now go through life, you find yourself tensing up and you find yourself reacting in sometimes pretty strong ways that even you afterwards know is it's not a good way to, I shouldn't have reacted that way, but I don't know why I did. And this is the mystery, right? It's we're not familiar with ourselves. So we have those moments where we sit there and we go, yo, I know I'm not supposed to get angry all the time. Like I told myself I'm not going to do it, but I just get angry. I don't know what to do. Right? Like we don't know how to make sense of it. Like we're strangers. You know, like with a stranger, you have no context for their behavior. You're like, why would they just put that credit card? What was that? It makes no sense to you, their behavior. A sign when you can't understand your own behavior, that's a sign you're like a stranger to yourself. Because you're so confused. Why did I do this? It's like, oh, you did it. If anyone has a good idea or will have a good idea, it's going to be you, but only if you look. And so I'm not going to go into a whole discussion about nervous systems. We spoke a lot about that during disembodiment. I do want to now come towards the conversation for today. As one grows up, the psychological safety you experience or the danger that you feel will lay the foundation for how you feel within yourself. And so when you're in danger, your body will react. And we know this. The heart rate increases. You breathe faster. It's an important point here. You breathe faster. And your blood pressure is elevated due to the flood of hormones through the body. The opposite is true. When you feel safe, your heart rate is slower, lower blood pressure, and slower breathing. And so, as we go through life, we're going to experience moments of chaos and stress. And for someone who's not regulated or whose window of tolerance is very small, they can become overwhelmed very quickly. They can panic and lose control. So now I want you to take a moment here and imagine someone's there and they're really starting to stress out about something going on in their life. You're sitting with them and they're just getting really worked up about something. They just checked their phone, they saw a message or they saw a mark, right? They saw something on their phone. They're like, oh my God. And they start thinking and they're panicking and their fingers are like moving, like just all these signs and symptoms of stress, anxiousness. And you're seeing this. What's one way to calm them down? Because the mind starts like swirling, right? You're thinking about this, that. What about this? What if this happens? And what could you do? Yeah. Mm, beautiful. Yeah, what you're describing is anger. The Prophet ﷺ said if someone's angry and they're standing, they should sit. And if they're sitting, they should lie down or they should go make wudu, because it calms a person. That's anger. But we're talking about anxiety, breathing. What I want to really focus on for the rest of the session today is breathing. We often don't think of breathing as having any relation to like religion and Islam and my spirituality or any of that. But breathing is profound. How many of you have looked into breathing at some point? And how many of you who've looked into it, show of hands, have found it to be a very profound thing in your life? It's subhanAllah. Breathing is, because what does breathing do? Obviously, it keeps us alive. What breathing does is connects us to the present moment. In a moment of stress and anxiety, our minds start to go everywhere in all different directions. Well, what about this? What if this happens? And your mind is considering all possibilities. You're thinking about the future. I'm gonna lose my job. You're catastrophizing. I'm gonna lose my job. I'm gonna then we're gonna get evicted, and then the family's gonna fall apart, and then I'm gonna live on the streets. And your mind starts doing all that. You're so disconnected from where you are in that moment. And one of the signs of that also is your breathing. You start to breathe very shallow because every part of you is disconnected from where you are. And breathing is so powerful in those moments for people because it anchors you. See, sitting here today, I can think thoughts about tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to do this, tomorrow I'm going to do that. I can like almost live tomorrow. I'm going to wake up in the morning, I'm going to make my coffee, go downstairs. I can like visualize, I can mentally walk through the whole tomorrow in my head. And you could do it too. So I could mentally be in like a different time period, tomorrow or yesterday or 2 years ago when the person said that to me or I did that thing. I could mentally be there. But you can't breathe tomorrow's breathing right now. With breath, you can only breathe the moment's breath. Do you get that? Your breath anchors you right here. Because with breath, you only have now. With thoughts, you have your whole history and you have your whole future. And you could use your thoughts to go anywhere and plan and ruminate on the past and be anxious about the uncertainty of the future. You could do all that with your thoughts. Breath, all you have is this moment's breath. And it is the breath itself. You know, they talk about how breath is our connection between the spirit and the world. To our body, first connection to our bodies, and then connection to the world is our breathing. And so through breathing, you anchor yourself and you return your nervous system to a state of regulation. What's really fascinating is, you know, in cases where people get really overwhelmed, where the anxiety levels are so high, and the nervous system, you know, the autonomic system, nervous system is like hijacked. People have panic attacks. Panic attacks are obviously very scary for individuals. What are panic attacks often mistaken with or mistaken for? Heart attacks. Why? What's the commonality there? Shortness of breath. Isn't that fascinating? That when you're so overwhelmed, your breath, right, becomes very shallow. And it's not just the breath becomes shallow, the airways constrict. The air around you, the room around you is full of air. There's no shortage of air, right? There's no shortage. It's the whole room is full of it. The individual can't take it in because the airways are constricted. And the airways are constricted due to the overwhelm. And that's where when you tell someone to breathe, you're literally reconnecting because they're so lost in their thoughts or in the scenario, they've almost dissociated and that they're there. And you're trying to bring them back. But they're not physically gone anywhere. So how do you bring them back? Through their breath. Because breath reconnects you to where you are. And that's why across spirituality traditions, whether we're talking about Buddhist philosophy or the Zen tradition or even in the Christian tradition, when there's talk of presence and talk of, you know, being present so that you can be with God or just being present, there's always discussion of breath. Always. Because someone could say, well, I'm not going to focus on my breath, I'm just going to think about God. Focus on Him. But how can you do that when you're not anchored? You don't have something that's a singularity that anchors you. Breath is the most immediate thing to you. And so you can even close your eyes and focus on it. Right? If you were orienting yourself or anchoring yourself in an object external to you, what happens when it's not there? So I'm anchoring myself right now by just focusing on that fire alarm. Right? Is the one thing. But what happens when it's not there? your breath is always with you. And that's why no matter where you are, it's the anchor that's always there with you. And it's connected to the moment, to the idea of, in Arabic, they talk about life as a series of breaths, right? In Persian, they talk about presence in every breath. You're noticing the moment. And for some of us, subhanAllah, we have always lived life in the future. We're never there. We're always in the next moment. What's coming up? What's coming up? We're always like that. And when you do that, you're always neglecting the present moment. And so, breath work, you've heard of this, I'm sure. Sitting for 5, 10, 15 minutes and practicing breathing. And not just breathing, but practicing deep breathing. This is one way. Now, why would you engage in breath work, right? Someone might say, why do that? I'll just breathe when in the moment of distress. Because you need to train yourself. You need to train yourself to have the capacity and to have the skill and technique of breathing in moments of distress. And so you train for moments of distress in moments of safety. And I'm talking about breathing, and we often think about like breathing through our nose or our mouths, right? But ultimately it's rooted in the lungs and the heart. And one of the markers of good health is your lungs. So what do we do to improve our lung health? What do we do? Do we just not stress it out? What do we do? Yeah, like harmful, yeah, we avoid things that would damage it, sure. But to improve it, what would we do? Cardiovascular exercise, which is so fascinating. Wait, I want my lungs to be healthy. Why would I distress my lungs? Right? Because it's not comfortable. We have marathon runners here, mashallah, some of you. Yeah, shortness of breath. Right? Lap number 8, 9, you're breathing hard. You're exerting yourself. Yeah. Absolutely, because your body has a stress response naturally to the demands of the activity. And we put ourselves into the activity. We choose it. We sign up for the class. We say, I want to do this. And it's fascinating. Because if you want to breathe well, why distress yourself? But we understand this is a principle that you will see across creation. Is we think distress is inherently bad. But it prepares us for life so that we don't get exhausted just running up the stairs at home. So you take moments out of your schedule and you stress yourself. And I'm going to connect this. If you guys are with me right now, I'm going to connect this to something a little deeper, spiritually speaking. Is we train ourselves to be able to breathe in moments of distress by, in moments of peace, putting ourselves through it and training ourselves to breathe. That's the system. And that's partly what breath work is as well. Breath work is practicing deep breathing for moments when you really need that deep breathing to anchor you. Now, I want to connect this to a different idea to kind of broaden that spectrum. Because if the foundation that anchors you is your breath, then the highest and broadest level of experience would be experiencing the world as a spiritual place, living in the divine presence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, in Surah Al-Zumar, the 39th chapter, verse 22, He says, أَفَمَنْ شَرَحَ اللَّهُ صَدْرَهُ لِلْإِسْلَامِ Can those people whose hearts Allah has opened and expanded to Islam, so that they're enlightened by their Lord, can they be equal to those who are misguided? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to describe two hearts. He talks about hearts that are hard and hearts that are soft. فَوَيْلٌ لِلْقَاسِيَةِ قُلُوبُهُم مِّن ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. He says hard hearts are those that are far from Allah's remembrance. Soft hearts are those that are attached to Allah's remembrance. Okay. The verse begins by talking about the expansion of the person's chest. And that's a very interesting idea as well. Because when you breathe deeply, your chest expands. And shallow breath, it might not even move, right? Because it just barely comes in and out, right? It's very shallow. As a believer, does our soul and spirit experience that expansion? When does, because expansion is good. Our spirit and soul experiences that with Islam. And I don't mean that as like a superficial cliche thing. I'm going to connect this deeper. So bear with me here. I want you to think about dhikr is to your spiritual heart what breathing is to your body. I'm going to explain this further because I'm not here to just drop, flowery lines that are like, oh, that sounds nice and let's go home. No. For me, this is deep reality. We're alive because we breathe. And our hearts are alive because they remember Allah. This hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ in the hadith of Bukhari and Muslim, he said, مثل الذي يذكر ربه والذي لا يذكر مثل الحي والميت. The one who remembers Allah is like someone who's living and alive. And the one who doesn't remember Allah is like the dead. Now you might say, what does that even mean? How does remembrance of Allah, how is that somehow life? When we're physically dysregulated, what do we use breathing to calm us down. It's the anchor for our physical existence. When we're spiritually dysregulated, which we often are, through difficulties, sadness, grief, we're also spiritually sometimes dysregulated through joy. How? We become so overjoyed that we forget Allah, that we feel like we're not even thinking about Allah. We're just so happy with life and enjoying it. What anchors us? Remembering that all that occurs in creation comes from Allah. That's why we have a teaching in our religion. Almost for everything that happens to you, there's a response that involves taking the name of Allah. You lose somebody who passes away, what do you say? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Why do you need that? And if you've asked people who've lost those who are close to them, and they've said it in the moment, so many of them will talk about how that statement anchored them. Because when you lose someone, you panic. They're gone. Oh no. And you're just like shocked. And it's like you lose sight of the larger reality of existence, and then inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un anchors you in what reality is. It's that, hey, why are you surprised they're gone? We all belong to Allah to begin with. This whole life is just a long journey of return to Allah. And when you say that, you kind of go, oh, yeah. And it anchors you. You see something really nice, and you're like, what? How'd they get it? Allahumma barik, mashallah. Allah blessed them. How can I be jealous if Allah blessed them? If Allah distributed His blessings and gave them that, I'm not going to object to Allah's distribution. Something good happens to you. You start to get really, really taken away by your own greatness. You say, alhamdulillah. That humbles you and anchors you. That no, you didn't just get that done by yourself. That's praise belongs to Allah. Dhikr anchors us. Not merely as a kind of verbal dhikr, but as dhikr as a reality and an expression of how things actually happen in the world. Does this make sense? That's why when something doesn't go your way, we're taught to say what? قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ وَمَا شَاءَ فَعَلَ. Allah decreed this, and whatever He wills will happen. Why do you say that? You might already know that, to remind yourself, because in that moment you might be disconnected from that reality. And spiritually then you're anchored through these words That's what Allah says in the Quran. أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ. Through remembering Allah, your heart finds peace. You're anchored. It doesn't just mean you say subhanallah or alhamdulillah. It means by remembering that Allah is in control and Allah is the one managing the affairs of the world, your heart stops fighting and objecting and it submits. But all of this begins with anchoring ourselves in our breath. And just like I was talking about how in order to strengthen your ability to breathe and to breathe in moments of distress and have the skills and resources, you practice it. You put yourself through distress. It's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for our hearts to be trained and for our hearts to be healthy enough to face life itself, He puts us through difficulties. And it's stressful. And it's painful. And sometimes it's exhausting. But we need it. We sign up for these difficulties. We sign up for Fajr. Fajr's not easy. But by doing that, by starting off my day, submitting myself to Allah, Ya Allah, I'm going to submit my entire day to you. We're anchoring our hearts amidst all the difficulty that we might face in that day. But we started off anchored with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so just like we don't see physical and cardiovascular exercise as like an obstacle to our happiness, we see it as a path to it. The believer starts to see the difficulties and the challenges they face in life not as obstacles, not as problems, not as abnormalities. But honestly, it's through these difficulties and staying anchored and remembering Allah through them that our heart gets stronger. We deepen in our spirituality, and probably all of us at some level have experienced this, that we felt closest to God in our lowest moments. In our lowest moments. Because the ego was shattered and we felt so low. And the Prophet told us, you are closest to God in sajda. Because that's a physical manifestation of, you can't go lower than that. You'd have to like dig into the ground then. The lowest position physically is when you're closest to God. Your lowest moments spiritually are also often when you're closest to God. Yeah. Spirituality? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you will burn out spiritually if you push too hard. Tomorrow you sit down, I'm going to do 1 hour dhikr. Try it out. Right? You might do it for one day and the next day is like, you might miss Fajr. Like your nafs rebels. Yes, your nafs will rebel when you push it too hard. So yeah, absolutely. That's what the Prophet ﷺ taught. You know, what is little but consistent is better than doing a whole bunch once and then just injuring yourself or overwhelming yourself, burning out. Absolutely. So daily practices of breath work. I'm not a breath work teacher, so I'm not going to do like some session here or something. But I do want to talk about the importance of this, anchoring ourselves in the moment and learning to breathe. I want to address one objection just before we wrap up. Because people object here. They hear me talk about this and hear others talk about it and they go, but wait, how come there's no mention of breathing in the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ? We don't find a hadith that talks about sit there for 5 minutes and breathe. So where are we getting this? Monday night halaqah talking about breathing? Well, part of the reason is they lived very natural lifestyles. Their lives were much slower in pace. They were connected to nature. They were connected to their environments. They had a lot more movement. Like we have to like try to get 10,000 steps in. Right? Like we have to plan it out and like go out of our way. When I was in Umrah recently in Mecca, Medina, I was doing like 15,000 without even trying. Just going for salah, like boom, 15,000. And imagine a lifestyle like that where you're just walking all the time. And half of the time as you walk, you're outside. See, we walk in hallways that are covered. But imagine to go to a neighbor's house, you're just walking there. Go to the store, you're just walking there. Villages, anyone who's been to a village knows this type of lifestyle. It's extremely healthy. You're connected. You're breathing fresh air all the time. It's a very natural lifestyle. You're connected to your circadian rhythm is very connected to the cycle of the sun and the moon and everything around you. You often end up eating healthier foods, right? Because you're not ordering DoorDash. Ain't nobody dashing doors in villages, all right? You're just cooking it there in the house. Are you with me? And so I want to recommend a book here on this topic of breath to show how much we have actually, to quote one biologist, he calls it disevolution, not evolution, disevolution. Um, he talks about, it's a book called Breath by, I'm really creative, right? By James Nestor. And he talks there about how, as we discovered fire and started cooking food and then softening it, that our jaws shrank. And so our food is easier to chew, so there's less chewing. And then we evolved to have smaller mouths, and then crowded teeth, collapsed airways. I want to share with you one little experiment that the author did. For 10 days straight, he blocked his nose. So he was a mouth breather alone for 10 days straight. And he says that this led to hypertension, fatigue, brain fog, near sleep apnea. Like the lungs were inflamed because there was unfiltered air just coming in all the time through the mouth. And so they were not doing well. He and his partner, who were kind of doing this experiment on themselves of just mouth breathing. And then they shifted to doing 10 days of just nose breathing. So they kind of taped their mouth and just went through life breathing through their nose. And they said almost immediately or really quickly, things reversed. Blood pressure normalized, sleep stabilized, snoring nearly vanished. And we're seeing now a lot of people look into this, right? You see people walk around with nose strips. You see them? Hormozy and others, they walk around with these nose strips all the time. There's a lot of science behind it, right? And if you've never tried it, I would recommend it. At nighttime, before when you go to sleep, try nose breathing. If you need to cover your mouth, cover your mouth. Give it a shot. Obviously, if you have a deviated septum, it's maybe not. Maybe check with your doctor. But otherwise, if you're generally you don't have issues with it, try it out. You will likely wake up less in the night. You will wake up more well rested. And all these things matter for your presence, for your spirituality. It's all connected. The human being is all connected in these regards. So really start to consider this. Um, inshallah, we're going to talk more about a little bit more about breathing, and then we're going to move on to the next topic next week, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the understanding of what it means to live heartfully and grant us the ability to do so and to really remain anchored throughout our lives, both physically and spiritually. آمين يا رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Jazakumullah khair to everybody for coming out. I appreciate your company and spending time with you all. If anyone has any questions, feel free. If you have to leave, obviously it's 9 o'clock. I get that. One of the nice things about there not being a salah after my talk is I'm down to stay back like 10, 15 minutes to answer questions if anyone has any. Obviously, I get it. If you got to go, it's 9 o'clock. You got to go. Please don't feel bad. You can absolutely just get up and leave. And if all of you just want to leave and no one has questions, that's fine too. All right, inshallah. Bismillah. Ideally related to the session, if possible. Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't witness the whole process. I witnessed that beginning point when they were in a lot of pain and they were very angry and somewhat in denial of the pain that the other person had caused them. And they were just very angry, and all they could see was the wrong that the other person had done. And they never paused to think of any role they might have played or any different approach they could have taken. Nothing. There was no self-reflection. It was just externally focused. That person hurt me, right? And I had tried in ways to kind of suggest or ask questions to see if maybe they might start considering, did I have a part in this? When I tried it initially, they were not open to that consideration, so I didn't push it further. But by eventually acknowledging their pain and saying, yes, this person hurt me, and yes, I'm in a lot of pain, and I really wish they hadn't done it. And I ultimately, what I actually want is for us to be on good terms, right? When there's rupture and it hurts you because you wish that there could be repair. That's what people want. Because if you don't want repair, you'll just move on. You'll have anger and all that, but you'll move on. But when a person hangs around and goes, how come they're not apologizing to me? How come they don't see how much pain I'm in? What do they want? They want repair. This individual, as they face that this person hurt me, yes, I am hurt. Yes, I allowed them to hurt me. And it's not because I'm weak. It's because I loved and I cared. And it's because I'm still here because I want to have a relationship. And as time went on, I think, they were able to kind of move past the pain because they had acknowledged it. Because if you deny it, you're stuck in it. So long as you deny your pain, you're going to be. It will pop up in so many ways trying to get your attention. So eventually, they were able to kind of acknowledge, yeah. One of the most powerful ways is to have someone witness it. And I suspect that's our conversation was what it did for this person. What I mean by witness it is that when you're angry, you sometimes have doubt. Am I just exaggerating this? Am I being dramatic? Am I blowing this out of proportion? And when someone sits in front of you and says, no, your pain's real, it's because you care. See, the other person doesn't see that this person cares. And all this person wants is their care to be validated. You tell them, no, what I see is someone who cares and who loves and who wants to feel connected to that person. It's very powerful. That's why I don't believe in AI therapy. I don't believe in it. Right? I don't believe in it because I don't believe healing happens merely through words. I believe the therapeutic alliance, the human to human connection, the witnessing of someone, seeing them, validating it, human to human, cannot be replicated by AI. It is a uniquely human phenomena. And it's so powerful. Anyone who's ever counseled or knows, just witnessing someone's pain is incredibly powerful. Incredibly, like subhanAllah. I can't articulate it. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Well, people who care and love from a place of deprivation will suffocate others. Almost guaranteed. When you're deprived of your core needs of love, you will then go and when you meet someone that could love you, you completely latch on and you suffocate them. And yeah, you're right. You essentially love too much. And you demand from them something they can't give you. So then you're disappointed. And that's where core needs are so important. Right? But yeah, there is this idea of loving in a measured way so that you don't demand from someone what they cannot offer you. So I agree with you. And sometimes it's trying to get people to see that maybe you went a bit too far with this. And that's why the other person backed off or did not realize or did not appreciate it. Maybe, right? Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. 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 Um, the first thing is identifying when it's too hard, right? Um, when someone keeps failing and their only solution is let me beat myself up harder, at some point someone has to point out to them, hey, it hasn't been working for like 3 years now. It's probably not going to work tomorrow either. Maybe we can shift our approach. Um, the best way is likely to work with a therapist. The best way is probably to work with a therapist who can, because you have to first identify the voice in your head that's beating you up. Identify where it comes from. Really start trying to counter it. I've done this with people. Like in conversations with people, I've seen people who, when they speak about themselves, oh man, bam. With everyone else, they're like, oh, mashallah, that person's so courageous. And when they come to themselves, yeah, like I'm just such a bad person. And they don't even realize it. And I said, hey, did you notice the language there? And they're like, no, it's not that deep. I'm like, no, it is. You don't use that language for other people. Every time it comes to you, and I'm like, it's not good. Like, not to shame the person, but to say, you got to start noticing this and start actively working of like, no, I'm not going to say that. Because there's two ways you could say it. One is, I'm such a bad, I'm so bad at math, right? It's just judgment statement right there. Or, I'm still growing in my mathematical skills. Very different. It's a very different approach, right? So starting to notice how you talk up to yourself and about yourself, even things like that, you start to like. It's like a process. It's not a one time sit with someone and solve it and move on. Because you probably developed that over a period of like 10, 15 years. This inner critic. So now to undo it, it will take some time. That's probably the best way to do it. Yeah. It starts with just awareness, though, just like noticing it to begin with, and that's huge. Because if you do, now you have an idea what to work on. Right? And that's what I do here, by the way. It's not therapy. So people are like, Sheikh, come on, give us some solutions. I'm like, I'm just here to raise awareness. Like, this is not a group therapy session where like let's work on actually addressing these things per se. Um, yeah, you observe them. It's acknowledging, observing. It's a really interesting thing when you observe your thoughts, where you detach from your thoughts and say, I'm not my thoughts. Because we talk in English, we say thoughts arise. I had a thought. This thought came to me. Like we use like this third person kind of description. A thought came to me. From where? Aren't you the thinker? No, but like we understand that sometimes I didn't actively try to think the thought. It just seemed to come up and arise and appear. We acknowledge that. So just kind of observing. And it doesn't mean that you are the thought. It's like the thought comes up. Okay, interesting. Yeah. You have ACT here, acceptance and commitment therapy, which has a lot to do with. The idea is that if you start wrestling with your thoughts, which CBT, you do a lot of that, you kind of counter. The thought pops up and you're like, well, that's not true. Let me with the thought. So it's cognitive load being used. Acceptance and commitment therapy says you're not going to get rid of thoughts necessarily with other thoughts, especially if you're an overthinker. You just spiral more. So it doesn't work for a lot of overthinkers. That's where acceptance and commitment therapy comes in, where you kind of just observe. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it helps, it should help form your perspective if it's a realization, right? If it's a thought that, kind of is a realization about something, you're just like, okay, that's nice to know, and I'll see what I can do with this now moving forward. But in the moment, you don't have to do anything. Yeah. Khair, inshallah, guys. We'll stop here, inshallah, and we'll see you guys next week. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.